Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 157. I'm Enigmius, and today, as promised, it's the Claymore capital vessel tour and blueprint video. We finished it. The 2-episode build. It wasn't really a build, it was mostly me building and then just kind of releasing a teaser video showing what we had in the last episode, and then this episode is basically completely finished. The blueprint, if you're looking for it, will be linked in the information box below the video, and we're just going to kind of take a tour around and see what's going on with the ship, what's included and what's not. We'll start with what's not. There are no drill turrets on the ship, there are no harvest containers inside, and there is no gravity generator. Now, I get a little bit of blowback from people every time I release a capital vessel design that doesn't include a gravity generator. And I appreciate that for some people, building a capital vessel without a gravity generator is like building a capital vessel without a warp drive. I'm not one of those people who feels that way. I don't put gravity generators on my capital vessels because I don't feel the need to. If you want a gravity generator, you can add one wherever you like. There's lots of room inside. It's not part of the design when I make these ships, so just keep that in mind. If you're looking for it, it's not there. Everything else, I think that a person can eat. Oh, there's nothing to grow food inside either. If you want to grow food in the ship, there's plenty of room. You can add the capability to do so, but it wasn't part of the intended purpose of the ship, so I didn't add it. The exterior of the ship, for those of you unaware, is modeled after that little guy down there. That's the broadsword, and then Big Daddy Claymore is there. The broadsword was, when I released it, my most intricate build. It was something that I was very, very happy with in terms of how it turned out. I like the look of it. It's very aggressive, very kind of beefy, and the lines on it just kind of really, I felt, went well together. So well that I wanted to rebuild it in a much larger version, and then in the process of doing that, it was inevitable that there were going to be certain modifications that take place, and eventually we ended up with this, which is very, very close to the original. Obviously a different color, and if you were to go around and compare the two very closely, you would find that there's a number of modifications both inside and out, and we're going to just kind of take a look around and see. First of all, you can see there's a lot of turrets on the ship. There's 6 on the underside of the ship as well. Basically, excluding the drill turrets, every turret type that's available for a capital vessel is represented on the ship in the maximum allowable number. It's up to you to provide your own ammunition. The difficulty with the design was more finding room for all the turrets than anything else, and I quite like the turret density. I mean, if you can imagine going up against this ship and having all of those turrets suddenly pointed at your ship, maybe not feeling too confident about the outcome anymore. That's a lot of guns, a lot of barrels pointed in your direction. I was kind of experimenting with different textures this time around, specifically shiny versus not shiny, and coming up with some interesting results. I found there are certain places where the difference is quite obvious, and there are certain places where it's not. If you look down here, for example, it almost looks like they're different shades, but all the difference really is the texture and what's reflecting light and what's not. So you can see this lighter looking area has very little reflective capacity, whereas the area up here, the shiny area, obviously has much more. And then if you compare the two by putting them side by side on the same plane, you really get sort of an idea of the difference between the two and how it kind of, again, changes the color a little bit, or at least seems to, but also does interesting things with the eye when you start moving around. I started thinking of building this in the nature of like a stealth sort of ship, and the goal would then become very dark colors, which the purple is a fairly dark color, and the least amount of shine possible, so that if you were particularly, obviously, in a PvP scenario, flying around in space where it's already dark, the ship would be a little bit harder to spot against the background that's quite often very dark. And then I realized that you're going to have a big-ass nameplate over your ship anyway, so it's not like you're going to be hiding from anyone successfully. For the most part, by the time you're close enough to start shooting, it's going to be pretty obvious exactly where you are. So I still was happy to do that little juxtaposition with the shiny and the not shiny. But the idea of the stealth ship was kind of crushed by the presence of those nameplates. We also have the ubiquitous selection of fixed barrel weapons, 4 missile launchers and 6 pulse laser cannons, all sort of kept nice and tightly grouped together to help with rewarding accuracy, as I've been putting it lately. So if you're able to hit the targets, it's going to do a fair bit of damage because you're going to have the barrels all basically firing at the same spot. If you're having difficulty hitting the target, you're probably going to be doing little to no damage, because if one projectile misses, chances are the rest are going to be missing as well. We have artillery turrets, which is always kind of fun. And then we have the entrance to the ship, which is down here. I'm just going to show you. We're not going to actually use the door, I don't think. I don't even know it's going to open for us. Yeah, it doesn't care. The door don't care. You enter the ship, you've got a little bit of protection here. One thing that I didn't spend a lot of time on was adding all of the possible defense turrets inside the ship. You can add another 6 if you want to in various locations, whatever floats your boat. And voila, we're on the inside of the ship. You can see right in the middle of the screen there, and the ceiling is the ventilator, so that you can have this whole area oxygenated. I didn't invest a lot of time or thought into compartmentalizing the ship. It's not that large, and I didn't really think it would be necessary. Again, if you disagree, if you would like to do that, then there's no reason that you can't. And in keeping with some of my other build philosophies, as soon as you come into the ship, really the first things that you see are the critical care sections. And I realized after I put all of these in that all of these little individual medic stations that allow you to remove status effects are rendered completely obsolete by the presence of the med bay right there. So I just decided to leave them there because they look kind of neat. But if you're coming into your ship and you're in really bad shape, you don't have to go far to get to the med bay or the oxygen generator, and that's always by design. I try to keep these as close to the points in the ship where you're making that transition from the outside to the inside as I can. You can see we've got 4 constructors. For a ship of this size, for its purpose, these are basically for making like fuel cells and ammunition. You can use them to make whatever you want, but I was thinking in terms of what you would actually be using these things to make, with the absence of the drill turrets, the harvest, things like that. It really comes down to what could you possibly need to make in a ship like this, and the most likely answer is ammunition and fuel cells. So I didn't include a ton of constructors. 4 I think would be plenty for most purposes. Around here we've got 2 fridges, 2 tier 2 fridges for storing food. There is no food processor here, but there's, like say, plenty of room to add more if you want. We've got the armor locker, the repair station, and then the containers. General storage here, we've got 2 large ammunition containers, and then if we come around to the other side of the ship, we've got 8 more large ammunition containers. So it's possible to bring quite a lot of ammunition for the ship, which I think is appropriate under the circumstances. Up here, you can see where I kind of cut the budget in this particular area of the ship. We've got our generators, we've got fuel tanks, we've got oxygen tanks. And this is reflecting on the fact that you don't have to interact directly with any of these in order to fill them anymore. So they're visible. They're not necessarily difficult to get to. You would probably need to build some elevators or some steps, or even just a bunch of blocks that you could hop up onto in order to get here. But they're tucked out of the way because you don't really have to get to them. It's just kind of a concession in the event that you need to do something later on. The game changes or something. It's easy to find them and know where they are, even though you aren't necessarily going to be going directly to them. And then this back section of the ship is for a warp drive. that's about it. Down here, I was just kind of goofing around. I did a little bit of detailing with this area here and coming up with different shapes and kind of experimenting. Nothing extremely special. And then we did sort of just like a gradually sloping back wall. And then lastly, we get to the forward section of the interior. I've mentioned before with previous ship designs, I'm not a fan of having glass viewports, I guess you could say, so you could see outside. It's just because glass is so flimsy, even the armored glass, that it just becomes the easiest way to punch a hole in your ship, and I'm not really the biggest fan of that. Up here we've got the core, and it's tucked in behind some armored glass because it's inside the ship and it's not easy to shoot through the ship to get here, but it is kind of interesting to look at, with 4 high intensity low radius purple lights just kind of reflecting the exterior color scheme, and it gives kind of a neat effect from a variety of different angles and such. It's got that sort of weird mysterious glowy thing going on. And then of course we've got the main bridge area, and sort of going very, very similar to what I did with the Saturnus forward bridge area, having that light kind of coming down. And again, it's a high intensity low radius light, so you can see it doesn't scatter the light over a wide area, but it does kind of travel a little bit, so that we can have this almost red alert sort of style cockpit area. And then I built a bunch of consoles around it just to make it look a little bit more interesting. I mean, this is where you're going to sit and gather all the information about where you're going and who you're shooting at, so it makes sense that you would have a variety of different tools at your disposal to do whatever it is you need to do to plot your intergalactic takeover or whatever it is you want to do. Very, very simple interior. A lot of just basic glossy metal with the standard dark gray color, and then we've got just a little bit of color and detail built throughout. And then I did these sort of half walls, which is basically just painting the gray to a black 2 blocks high, and then putting these beams across here, painting the underside blue and then the top and the outer side purple, and then we could just kind of go around, and it adds just a tiny little bit of detail that makes it a little bit more interesting than if we had just left all of the shiny gray. I didn't even do a whole lot on the floor here. Again, very, very Spartan, very simple, very straightforward. The idea is, if you're taking this out and you're getting into kind of a fight scenario and you're taking damage, rebuilding and repainting the outside could end up being sort of a chore on its own. Having to do it all on the inside as well might be a little bit much. So deliberately simple and straightforward, but at the same time with a few details that just kind of are a little bit more interesting than if we just kind of plunked a cockpit in the middle of the floor and called it done. So that is the Claymore capital vessel redesign of the broadsword, ready for your immediate misuse and abuse however you see fit. It handles really well. It's got plenty of RCS units, close to 150. It's got plenty of thrust in any given direction. It's reasonable on fuel. You may wish to add more fuel tanks depending on your own objectives. I could see myself adding more fuel tanks to this before I get too much more use out of it, which is not to say I've got a ton of use out of it, but I did kind of fly it around, and I think it had the base when it was full was about 17 hours of fuel with everything turned on, obviously, but nothing actually doing anything, and then it tended to fluctuate obviously down from there depending on what I was doing. If you have any comments or feedback about the design, feel free to leave them below. The next episode, we're going to start on the next ship. It's going to be a hover vessel. We need a new hover vessel. We had the Manta in the previous worlds, and I was going to bring it over, and I decided we're just cycling through these different ship classes and building new ones, so we might as well just build a new hover vessel design. We're going to be doing something that I've hinted at for the exterior, if you've been following the series, that I've never put in any build previous to the one that we're about to start, and I'm hopeful that it'll just be a good, usable, functional ship that looks really, really cool from the outside and very, very interesting and unique. So if you want to be notified about that and future videos, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.